A black single dad looked into a stranger's eyes and quietly asked, "Can you be my daughter's mother for one day?" It wasn't because he wanted to replace the woman he had lost. It was because of a promise he made to his late wife. A promise he refused to break, no matter the cost. What happened after that simple question would expose prejudice, test courage, and change far more than one little girl's future. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about a father. It's about one promise that opened a door for countless families. The last parents had already left Harbor Point Youth Center by the time Darius Monroe stepped through the front doors. Outside, a light October drizzle blurred the parking lot into streaks of silver beneath the streetlights. Inside, the building hummed with the tired buzz of fluorescent fixtures that never seemed bright enough. Someone was stacking folding chairs in the gym down the hall. A basketball bounced once. Then silence settled over the nearly empty center. Leah Carson was locking a filing cabinet when she heard slow footsteps stop outside her office. She looked up. Darius? He stood there wearing faded work boots, dark coveralls with grease stains across one sleeve, and rainwater dripping from the shoulders of his jacket. He looked like a man who had come straight from work without stopping to change. "I know you're closed," he said quietly. Leah glanced at the clock. "We are." Neither of them moved. She had expected an angry phone call after denying his appeal that morning. Maybe even an email copied to the city council. She hadn't expected him to show up in person. "If this is about the night trail decision," she began. "It is." His voice carried no anger. That somehow made her more uneasy. Darius stepped inside and carefully closed the office door behind him. For a second, he simply looked around the room, as though making sure they wouldn't be interrupted. Then he reached into the pocket of his jacket. Leah expected paperwork. Instead, he laid an old brass compass on her desk. It landed with a soft, metallic click. The glass across its face was cracked from one edge to the other. The brass had been polished so many times that the edges were smooth from years of careful hands. Leah looked from the compass to Darius. "I don't understand." He rested one hand lightly beside it, neither protective nor possessive, just familiar. Finally, he met her eyes. "Can you be my daughter's mother for one day?" The words seemed too strange to belong in the quiet office. Leah blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" "You heard me." For a moment she wondered if she had misunderstood. Maybe he meant volunteer. Maybe he meant chaperone. Maybe... "Darius," she said slowly. I don't think that's an appropriate thing to ask." "I know." "Then why ask it?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched until the rain tapping against the windows became the loudest sound in the room. Leah folded her arms. "You appealed because the program requires a mother or female guardian. I explained why that policy exists. You did. And I told you I was sorry." "I know." "You also know I can't rewrite the rules because one parent disagrees with them." "I know that too." His calmness unsettled her more than shouting ever could. Most parents argued, most demanded, most tried to make her feel guilty. Darius simply stood there looking exhausted, not defeated, just tired. She glanced again at the cracked compass. "Why me?" His eyes drifted toward the compass before returning to hers. "Because I made her a promise." Leah frowned. "A promise to Ava?" He didn't answer. Instead, he traced the cracked glass once with his thumb. It wasn't a nervous habit. It looked almost like greeting an old friend. Leah noticed something engraved inside the brass lid, but from where she sat, she couldn't make out the words. Darius. Her voice softened despite herself. If this is about your wife. He looked away toward the rain-covered window. For the first time since entering the room, emotion crossed his face. Not anger, grief. The kind that had learned to sit quietly instead of demanding attention. I don't need anyone to replace Naya. The sentence came out barely above a whisper. I never asked for that. Then what are you asking me to do? He took a slow breath. I just need one day. One day for what? So my daughter doesn't spend the rest of her life believing there's a door she can never walk through because her mother isn't alive. Leah's throat tightened. She had reviewed hundreds of applications over the years. She had defended Harbor Point's policies in board meetings, interviews, and community forums. Never once had she imagined hearing them described like that. A closed door. She searched for the right response. There are other programs. I know. She can still participate this summer. I know. The night trail was designed for. I know who it was designed for. His words were gentle, too gentle. And that's exactly why I'm here. Leah looked down again at the compass. The crack across the glass split the reflection of the overhead light into two uneven pieces. She suddenly realized how carefully Darius had placed it on her desk, as though it mattered, as though breaking it any further would mean losing something that could never be repaired. She looked back at him. Why bring this? A faint smile appeared. The first one. It lasted barely a second. Because she never goes anywhere without it. And if you're going to understand my answer someday. He stopped himself, then quietly pushed the compass a little closer to her. You'll need to remember this. Leah stared at him. There were too many questions, too few answers. Finally, she shook her head. I can't give you an answer tonight. I didn't ask for one tonight. He picked up the compass, slipped it carefully back into his pocket, and opened the office door. Before walking away, he stopped without turning around. I don't need you to pretend you're her mother. Another pause. I just need you to make sure she never feels like she isn't enough, because she lost hers. Then he walked into the empty hallway. His footsteps faded until the only sound left was the rain against the windows. Leah remained frozen behind her desk, long after the front door closed, long after the lights in the hallway clicked off. She couldn't stop seeing the cracked compass, or hearing one sentence repeating itself inside her mind. I made her a promise. But as she stared into the dark office, another question slowly replaced it. Had Darius made that promise? To his daughter? Or to the woman who would never walk through Harbor Point's doors again? The next morning began long before sunrise. At 4:37 a.m., Darius Monroe was already standing in the basement mechanical room of Riverside Towers, one of Milwaukee's oldest public housing buildings. The air smelled faintly of machine oil, damp concrete, and burnt dust. Above him, steel cables hummed as Elevator 3 struggled through another slow climb. He closed his eyes. Most technicians reached for their tools first. Darius listened first. A faint scraping. A pause. Another scrape. Then a vibration barely noticeable beneath the soles of his boots. There you are, he murmured. His partner, Rick Alvarez, looked up from a clipboard. You seriously hear that? Darius nodded toward the control panel. Drive sheave bearing. Couple more weeks and it'll seize. Rick laughed. I've worked with you 6 years, and you still freak me out. Darius smiled without looking away from the machine. It talks. Most people just don't listen. 40 minutes later, the elevator was running smoothly again. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, an 83-year-old resident with a walker, rolled into the lobby and clapped softly. "I knew they'd send my favorite repairman." "You say that every time." "Because it's always true." She reached into her shopping bag. "I baked blueberry muffins. You keep feeding me, I'll stop fitting in these coveralls." She handed him two anyway. "One for you." She smiled. "One for your little girl." Darius accepted them with both hands. "Thank you, Miss Evelyn. You tell Ava I expect another one of those drawings." "I will." Rick watched the exchange as they walked back toward the service truck. "Everybody around here knows your kid." "They know hers," Darius corrected quietly. "I'm just the delivery service." Rick chuckled. "Man, you're impossible." By 7:30, Darius had already finished 2 emergency calls. By 8, he was sitting in his truck outside Lincoln Elementary with the engine off. The dashboard clock read 8:04. School started at 8:15. He always tried to arrive early, even after working all night, even if it meant sleeping sitting upright during his lunch break. Ava climbed out of the passenger seat wearing a faded blue backpack almost as big as she was. "You packed lunch?" He lifted the paper bag. "Turkey sandwich." "No mustard?" "You act like I don't know you." She grinned. "You finally learned." As she started toward the school entrance, she suddenly turned back. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "You think Miss Carson's gonna say yes?" For the briefest moment, he considered lying. Instead, he shook his head gently. "I don't know." Ava lowered her eyes. "I shouldn't have asked." "You didn't." "I mean, I shouldn't have wanted it so much." He stepped out of the truck. Rain from the night before still clung to the maple trees lining the sidewalk. Kneeling in front of her, he zipped her jacket all the way to her chin. "Listen to me." She looked up. "Wanting something your mom promised you doesn't make you selfish. But maybe the program isn't for families like ours." Those words landed harder than she realized. Darius forced himself to smile. "Families aren't measured by paperwork." She searched his face. "Then why do they keep saying no?" For several seconds, he had no answer. He simply rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out." She nodded, pretending that was enough. It wasn't. He watched until she disappeared inside the school. Only then did he lean back against the truck, close his eyes, and exhale. His phone buzzed. Another service request. Another broken elevator. Another building. He started the engine. The fuel warning light blinked. Again. He glanced at his wallet lying on the passenger seat. Inside was exactly $43. Rent was due in 5 days. The hospital was still waiting on the last payment from Nia's medical bills. He folded the overdue notice back into the envelope before Ava could ever see it. She never would, if he had anything to say about it. That afternoon, after 12 straight hours of work, Rick found Darius asleep in the driver's seat outside another apartment complex. Not deeply asleep, just enough to survive. His work boots were still on. His lunch sat untouched beside him. 2 blueberry muffins rested carefully inside the paper bag. One was missing. The other was waiting for Ava. Rick shook his head. "You know, one of these days you're gonna have to start taking care of yourself." Darius rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "I do." Rick looked around the empty truck. "No." A faint smile crossed Darius's face as he started the engine again. "I take care of the part that matters most." As Riverside Towers disappeared in his rearview mirror, The folded overdue bill slid from the dashboard onto the passenger seat. He picked it up before stopping at the next red light, then quietly tucked it back into the kitchen drawer in his mind. The same invisible place where he had hidden every fear since Nia died. Because Ava never needed to carry the weight her father could still lift alone. At least, that was what he kept telling himself. Saturday mornings used to belong to maps. Long before cancer, hospital rooms, and unpaid medical bills became part of their lives, Leah Monroe would spread a paper trail map across the kitchen table while pancakes cooled on a plate. "Never trust the shortest path," she'd tell Ava, tracing a finger through winding green lines. "Trust the one that gets everyone home." Ava was only 6 the first time she learned to read contour lines. By 8, she could tell north without looking at a compass. By 10, she had stopped asking why her mother no longer came on their walks. Instead, she remembered everything Nia had ever taught her. That Saturday, the old apartment felt unusually quiet. Morning sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, catching dust floating above the small kitchen table where the cracked brass compass rested between father and daughter. Ava turned it slowly in her hands. The crack got bigger. It did. "Does it still work?" Darius looked at the trembling needle. "Most days." She smiled faintly. "Mom used to say people are like compasses." He nodded. "I remember. When they get hurt, they don't always stop working." "No. They just need more time to find north." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar. Ava carefully opened the compass lid. Inside, the engraving reflected the morning light. "Find your way. Leave room for others." She traced the letters with one finger. "I wish I remembered her voice better." Darius lowered his coffee mug. "You do?" "No, I don't." "You remember how she laughed when pancakes burned?" Ava smiled, and when squirrels stole her birdseed. "You remember how she always sang the wrong words to old country songs?" Ava laughed softly. She really did. "You remember more than you think." The smile faded. "Then why can't I remember the last thing she said to me?" The question hung in the room. Darius looked out the window before answering, because he remembered. Every word, every pause, every breath. But some memories belonged to a child only when she was ready to carry them. "You were scared." "I know. So was she." Ava stared at the compass again. "Did Mom really promise we'd do the night trail?" "She signed you both up the week you were born." Ava blinked. "What?" "She said one day you'd be old enough to walk it together." "But I wasn't." "No." Her fingers tightened around the brass case. "I waited." "I know." "I kept thinking maybe they'd let me join early." "I know." "When she got sick," she stopped. "I thought if she got better before my birthday." The rest disappeared into silence. Darius reached across the table, not to take the compass, just to rest his hand beside hers. "I wanted that too." Ava looked at him with red eyes. "So why are we still trying?" He took a slow breath. "Because promises don't disappear when someone dies." She searched his face. "But they can." "No." "What if nobody lets us?" Darius smiled gently. "Then we'll keep knocking." She looked toward the window. "Mrs. Carson doesn't even know Mom." "No." "Then why do you think she'd help?" He hesitated, long enough for Ava to notice. "I don't know if she will." "Then why ask her?" He looked at the compass. Because the answer wasn't something a 10-year-old could fully understand. Not yet. Sometimes, he said quietly, the right person isn't the one who already agrees with you. She frowned. Then who? The one who still has the chance to. Ava didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. Later that afternoon, she carried the compass into her bedroom and tucked it carefully inside the front pocket of her backpack. She had done the same thing every day since her mother's funeral. As Darius walked past the open doorway, he noticed something taped above Ava's desk. It was an old photograph. Nia stood in a forest wearing her park ranger uniform, kneeling beside a 6-year-old Ava holding a folded trail map upside down. Across the bottom, written in Nia's handwriting, were 4 simple words. Next year, we'll finish. Darius stood there longer than he meant to, because he knew something Ava didn't. There would never have been a next year. Nia had already known she was running out of time when she wrote those words, and somehow, she had still chosen hope. That night, as rain tapped softly against the apartment windows once again, Ava called from her bedroom. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "If Ms. Carson says no." He waited. "Will you still come walking with me?" A lump rose in his throat. "Every single time." Ava smiled in the darkness. "Okay." But after she fell asleep, Darius remained alone at the kitchen table. The compass sat beside an unopened stack of bills. He gently closed its lid, then whispered words no one else was there to hear. "I'm still trying, Nia." Across town, Leah Carson unlocked her front door just after 8. The house was quiet except for music drifting faintly from upstairs. Not piano, not television. A bedroom door closed, then silence. "Sophie?" Leah called. No answer. She set her laptop bag on the kitchen counter and noticed a sticky note beside the coffee maker. "Gone to Emma's. Don't wait up." No heart. No smiley face. Just hurried handwriting. Leah sighed. 3 years ago, Sophie would have been sitting at the counter doing homework while asking a dozen questions about every rescue story her mother had ever lived through. Now the conversations rarely lasted longer than a few minutes. Leah poured herself coffee she no longer wanted and opened her laptop. The Harbor Point board packet still waited on the screen. Attendance numbers, volunteer schedules, safety reports, liability forms. Every page reminded her why the mother-daughter night trail existed. Years earlier, several girls had admitted they felt more comfortable discussing certain fears in an environment reserved for women and female guardians. Counselors had supported the idea. Donors had funded it. The city had approved it. Leah had defended that decision ever since. Not because she disliked fathers, because she believed safety sometimes required boundaries. Yet every time she reached the next page, she saw a cracked brass compass instead of words. She finally shut the laptop. Her phone buzzed. A text from Harbor Point staff. "Did the Monroe father come back today?" She typed one word. "Yes." Another message appeared almost immediately. "Persistent guy." Leah stared at the screen before locking it without replying. Persistent. That wasn't the word she would have chosen. There had been no yelling, no threats, no accusations, just a tired man asking an impossible question. The next afternoon, on her drive home from Harbor Point, Leah stopped at a red light outside an aging apartment complex. A maintenance truck sat near the entrance. She recognized it before she realized why. Months earlier, this exact parking lot had been filled with frustrated residents after her car refused to start. She remembered standing beside the smoking engine, already late for an important meeting. Then a man in grease-stained coveralls had walked over carrying nothing more than a flashlight and a toolbox. "You've got a burned battery cable," he had said after less than a minute. She had asked how much she owed him. He simply tightened the new connection, closed the hood, and smiled. "Next time you meet a family that doesn't fit the paperwork," he had wiped his hands on an old rag, "look a little longer before deciding they don't belong." Before she could answer, he had climbed back into the maintenance truck and driven away. At the time, she had assumed he was talking about the apartment residents. Now she realized he had been talking about himself. The traffic light turned green. Leah didn't move. A horn sounded behind her. She drove on, but the memory refused to leave. That evening, Harbor Point's executive director called. "The Monroe appeal is still open." "I know. The board expects us to stay consistent." "They will." A pause. "You aren't considering making an exception, are you?" Leah looked out her living room window. Children were riding bicycles beneath the streetlights. Parents waited nearby. Different families, different stories. "No," she answered automatically. Yet the word felt heavier than it had a week earlier. After the call ended, she walked upstairs and stopped outside Sophie's room. The door was half open. Inside, photographs covered one wall. Camping trips, birthday parties, school plays. Then Leah noticed something missing. There wasn't a single recent picture of the two of them together. She leaned gently against the doorway. "When did that happen?" Sophie looked up from her book. "When did what happen? When did we stop showing up in the same pictures?" Her daughter hesitated. "I don't know." Leah nodded slowly. Neither did she. Later that night, unable to sleep, she unlocked her office at Harbor Point. The building was empty. Moonlight spilled through the lobby windows. She unlocked her desk drawer and removed the folder labeled Monroe, Ava. Inside lay the rejected application. On top was a handwritten note from Darius. Only one sentence. "My daughter is asking to keep a promise, not break a rule." Leah read it once, then again. Finally, she closed the folder. She wasn't ready to change Harbor Point's policy. She still believed the rule had been created for good reasons. But for the first time, she began wondering whether protecting one group of children had accidentally closed the door on another. The following morning, before she could give herself time to reconsider, Leah picked up her phone. She dialed the number listed on Ava's application. When Darius answered, there was only a brief silence. Then Leah spoke the words she had been resisting all weekend. "I'll do it." Another silence. But only once. She closed her eyes before adding the condition she hoped would protect both of them. "This will be the only exception." Darius didn't answer right away. Leah wondered if the call had dropped. Then his voice came through, calm as ever. "Thank you." Nothing more. No celebration. No argument. No attempt to negotiate. He simply thanked her. After they hung up, Leah sat staring at her phone longer than she expected. For some reason, she had imagined the conversation ending with relief. Instead, it ended with responsibility. 3 evenings later, Harbor Point buzzed with families arriving for the annual mother-daughter night trail. Girls hurried across the courtyard carrying backpacks and flashlights while volunteers checked names against clipboards. Laughter echoed between the brick buildings as mothers adjusted rain jackets and tied loose shoelaces. Darius parked across the street. He switched off the engine but made no move to get out. Ava sat quietly beside him, her small backpack resting on her knees. "You nervous?" he asked. "A little." "So am I." She smiled. "You don't even get to come." I know. They laughed together. For a brief moment, the tension dissolved. Then Ava spotted Leah standing near the registration table wearing a Harbor Point windbreaker. She's here. I see her. Neither of them moved immediately. Darius reached into the center console and lifted out a small cloth pouch. He opened it carefully. Inside rested Nia's brass compass. The crack across the glass caught the fading evening light. He held it in both hands before offering it to Ava. Your mom would have wanted you to carry this. Ava accepted it almost reverently. It still sticks sometimes. I know. What if it points the wrong way? Darius smiled. Then don't follow the needle. She frowned. What do I follow? He gently tapped the center of the compass. The person you've become. Ava lowered her eyes, then carefully opened the lid. The familiar engraving shone beneath the porch lights. Find your way. Leave room for others. She whispered the words to herself before slipping the compass into the front pocket of her backpack. Just as she stood, the backpack brushed against the truck door. The compass slid free. It struck the concrete with a sharp metallic crack. Both of them froze. Ava quickly picked it up. Another thin fracture now crossed the glass, branching from the old one like lightning across a night sky. The needle twitched, stopped, then jerked uncertainly before settling. Dad! Her voice trembled. I broke it. Darius examined the compass without saying anything. He slowly turned it in his hands. The brass case was still intact. Only the glass had given way a little more. It's all right. But Mom's compass is still your mom's compass. He placed it back in her palm. Some things survive being broken. She nodded, though she wasn't completely convinced. Across the courtyard, Leah noticed them walking toward her. As they approached, Ava offered a polite smile. Hi, Ms. Carson. Hi, Ava. Leah knelt so they were nearly eye level. I'm glad you're here. So am I. Leah looked toward Darius. We'll check in over there. He nodded. I know. She hesitated before continuing. Remember our agreement. I remember. You can't enter the trail. I won't. This has to stay within program guidelines. It will. There was no resentment in his voice, only acceptance. Leah found that strangely difficult to face. Ava reached for her father's hand one last time. He squeezed it gently. No matter what happens tonight. She looked up. I'm proud of you already. She wrapped her arms around him in a quick hug, then stepped back. I'll tell Mom everything. Darius swallowed. I think she'd like that. Leah watched the exchange without speaking. There was no emptiness between father and daughter, no missing piece waiting for someone else to fill it. Only love, quiet, steady, complete. As the participants gathered beneath the entrance archway, volunteers called everyone into formation. Leah started walking with Ava toward the waiting group. After only a few steps, she heard Darius's voice behind her. Ms. Carson. She turned. He remained standing outside the entrance, exactly where the rules required. I meant what I said the other night. She waited. I don't need you to become her mother. Leah nodded slowly. I know. He looked toward Ava. If you open this door for her. His eyes met Leah's again. Please don't close it behind her. Before she could answer, the opening whistle echoed across Harbor Point. The gates slowly swung inward. Ava crossed the threshold beside Leah. Darius stayed where he was, watching, not because he doubted his daughter, but because every promise worth keeping required someone willing to let go. As the gates closed, He noticed Ava glance back one last time. He smiled and raised a hand. She smiled back, then disappeared into the gathering twilight. A few seconds later, Darius looked down. The compass had pointed north for years. Tonight, through the cracked glass, the needle gave a tiny, uncertain shiver, just enough to make him instinctively take one step forward. He almost called Ava's name, but the gates had already closed. A steady mist drifted in from Lake Michigan, wrapping the trees in a silver haze as the night trail began. Dozens of headlamps flickered to life, weaving through the darkness like a slow-moving string of stars. Laughter echoed along the opening stretch of the trail as girls compared flashlights and pointed excitedly toward glowing markers tied to tree branches. Leah walked near the front of Group 3. Beside her, Ava stayed unusually quiet. She wasn't afraid. She was watching. Watching where the puddles formed. Watching how the wind pushed through the trees. Watching the narrow streams of rainwater slipping across the path. It reminded her of weekends with her mother. "Water always tells you where the land wants you to go," Nia used to say. A volunteer checked the handheld navigation tablet. "Trail looks clear." Leah nodded. "Keep moving." Farther ahead, Marianne Holt stood beneath a canopy, speaking with two city sponsors. Her crisp rain jacket looked untouched despite the weather. One staff member hurried toward her. The GPS signal dropped for a few seconds. Marianne barely looked up. "It'll reconnect." "What if we pause the groups until we verify the route?" Marianne shook her head. "We have parents watching. Reporters are covering the event. We are not canceling because of a weak signal." The volunteer hesitated. "The weather's getting worse. The trail was inspected yesterday." Her voice left no room for discussion. "Keep everyone moving." Several hundred yards away, Ava slowed her pace. She crouched beside the edge of the trail. Leah noticed. "Everything okay?" Ava pointed toward a shallow stream flowing across the dirt. "The water's going the wrong way," Leah smiled politely. "What do you mean?" "My mom taught me that water always runs away from higher ground." "It does." Ava looked deeper into the woods. "So why is this water flowing toward the hill?" Leah followed her gaze. At first she saw nothing unusual. Then she noticed another detail. Fresh wooden stakes marked the electronic trail. The wood looked almost new. The surrounding soil didn't. It was darker, looser, as if it had been disturbed recently. Ava walked a few steps closer before stopping. "Those footprints are sinking." One of the adult volunteers frowned. "They're probably from yesterday." Ava shook her head. "No." "How do you know?" "The edges are still falling in." Leah felt a quiet uneasiness settle into her chest. She radioed the lead volunteer farther ahead. "Status check," Static answered. She tried again. Only broken fragments came back through the speaker. "Copy. Signal." Then silence. Behind them, the girls continued chatting, unaware of the tension growing among the adults. Another volunteer held up the navigation tablet. "The GPS just shifted." Leah looked at the screen. The blue route line now bent sharply toward an older maintenance corridor that hadn't appeared on the printed orientation map she'd reviewed earlier that week. She frowned. "That can't be right." Before anyone could respond, Marianne's voice came through the radio. "Group 3, continue following electronic guidance." Leah pressed the transmit button. "We've got unstable ground markers. The route is approved. The terrain doesn't match yesterday's inspection." A brief pause. Then Marianne answered firmly. "The digital survey updated this afternoon." Leah stared at the muddy trail ahead. Nothing about it felt updated. Everything about it felt wrong. She looked down at Ava. The little girl wasn't looking at the GPS. She was watching the rainwater, watching the trees, listening. My dad says maps are only useful if someone remembers to look outside. Leah felt the words settle heavily inside her. For years, she had trusted procedures, checklists, technology, rules. Now a 10-year-old child was quietly asking her to trust something older. Observation, experience, common sense. The radio crackled again. Group 3, why have you stopped? Every parent behind Leah waited. Every volunteer looked toward her. She had two choices: follow the official route approved by her supervisors, or believe the instincts of the very child her own system had nearly excluded. Leah slowly lowered the radio. We're holding position. One volunteer blinked. Are you sure? No one moves. A few parents exchanged nervous glances. The rain grew heavier. Somewhere ahead, hidden beyond the trees, a deep metallic groan echoed through the darkness. It sounded like old steel shifting under pressure. Every conversation stopped. A second later, the headlamps flickered. Once, twice. Then, from somewhere beneath the maintenance tunnel ahead, every service light went dark at exactly the same moment. The forest fell into a silence so complete that even the rain suddenly sounded too loud. Everyone stay where you are. Leah's voice remained steady, though her pulse wasn't. Parents instinctively drew closer to their daughters. Volunteers swept their headlamps across the trees, but the beams disappeared into sheets of rain. The radio hissed. No words, only static. Leah grabbed her phone. No signal. She tried again. Nothing. Then she remembered. The old service tunnels beneath this section of the park. Years ago, Harbor Point had hired an elevator maintenance contractor to inspect emergency power systems connected to those tunnels. Only one person had ever explained the layout so clearly she could still picture it. Darius Monroe. She scrolled through her contacts and pressed call. This time, the phone rang. Across the city, 12 floors above the ground, Darius knelt beside the open doors of Elevator 2 inside Riverside Towers. A frightened elderly woman remained inside the stalled cabin, gripping her walker with both hands. Mrs. Jenkins, Darius said gently. I've got you. The elevator had stopped only a few inches below the 12th floor landing. Normally, that wasn't dangerous. Tonight, the control system kept slipping just enough to make the cabin shift with a low, metallic groan. Rick looked over from the electrical panel. I don't like that movement. Neither do I. Darius secured another locking brace into place. His phone vibrated inside his pocket. He ignored it. The cabin moved again. Mrs. Jenkins gasped. I don't want to fall. You won't. His voice never changed. I promise. The phone vibrated again. Then again, Rick glanced toward him. You gonna answer that? Not until she's out. Another careful adjustment. Another safety pin locked into place. Only then did Darius help Mrs. Jenkins step carefully onto the hallway floor. The older woman burst into relieved tears. He stayed beside her until building staff brought a chair. Only after seeing her safely seated did he reach for his phone. 3 missed calls. Leah Carson. His stomach tightened. He called immediately. Leah answered before the first ring had finished. Darius. What happened? The trail lost power. He was already walking toward the stairs. Where are you? Near the old maintenance corridor. He stopped. Every muscle in his body went still. The East Tunnel? I think so. His expression changed instantly. Leah. She heard something in his voice she hadn't heard before. Fear. You need to listen carefully. I'm listening. If you're where I think you are, don't let anyone enter the service tunnel. We haven't. Good. The GPS keeps directing us that way. Ignore it. Rain hammered against the building windows as Darius sprinted down the concrete stairwell. There's an old drainage system underneath that section. You told me years ago. Didn't know they were still using trails above it. They shouldn't be. He burst through the lobby doors into the storm. What do we do? Keep everyone together. We are. Stay away from low ground. She turned her flashlight toward the muddy trail. Water was already flowing faster than before. Darius. What? I don't know how long we can stay here. I'll be there. He hung up before she could answer. Rick caught up outside. What happened? My daughter? Without another word, Darius climbed into the service truck. The engine roared to life. Rain blurred the windshield almost instantly. Traffic crawled. Headlights reflected off flooded intersections. Every second felt stolen. Halfway across town, emergency vehicles blocked part of the boulevard. Darius gripped the steering wheel tighter. His phone buzzed again. A text from Leah. Water rising. He accelerated the moment the lane opened. At Harbor Point, parents tried to remain calm. Some girls cried quietly. Others asked when they could go home. Leah kept scanning the darkness beyond the trail. Ava stood beside her, watching the rain disappear beneath the trees. It's getting faster, Ava whispered. Leah followed her gaze. The shallow stream they had noticed earlier had become a moving sheet of water. Not flooding yet, but changing. Fast. Several minutes later, headlights finally cut through the rain outside the park entrance. Darius jumped from the truck before it had completely stopped. His clothes were soaked within seconds. Leah ran toward him. The maintenance tunnel is beyond that gate. He followed her flashlight beam. His heart sank. The emergency access road disappeared into darkness, where he remembered steel service doors hidden beneath the hillside. If the drainage gates had failed, there wasn't much time. He looked toward the frightened families waiting behind Leah, then toward the narrow maintenance entrance ahead. I can get them out. Leah searched his face. How? I know another way. He didn't tell her what that meant, because the only route he remembered ran directly through the section of tunnel where the water would reach first. Leah, I need everyone to stay calm. Darius pulled a flashlight from the emergency compartment inside his truck and clipped a portable voltage tester to his belt. If people panic, this tunnel becomes dangerous before the water ever does. Leah nodded without hesitation. What do you need from me? Keep the families together. Nobody walks alone. He looked toward Ava. Their eyes met across the rain. She didn't wave. She simply gave a small nod. The same quiet confidence her mother used to carry. Darius answered with one of his own before disappearing through the narrow steel maintenance door. The smell inside was instantly different. Cold concrete, standing water, rust. His flashlight swept across walls lined with aging electrical conduits and emergency shut-off boxes he hadn't seen in years. Come on. He found the first control cabinet exactly where he remembered. The lock had rusted, but the manual release still worked. He pulled the lever. Nothing. He tried again. A heavy mechanical thud echoed somewhere deep beneath the hillside. Then the emergency ventilation fans groaned to life. not full power. Enough. Outside, Leah heard the sound. What was that? Darius's voice crackled through her phone. I've isolated part of the system. Is that good? It buys us time. How much? I don't know. The answer was honest, not comforting. He hurried deeper into the tunnel. Water now covered the floor, splashing over his boots with every step. Ahead, a steel security gate blocked the old maintenance passage leading toward the families. The electric lock was dead. Good. That meant it could be opened manually. He spun the release wheel with both hands. It resisted. Years of corrosion fought every turn. Move! The wheel shifted another inch, then another. Finally, the gate released with a loud metallic groan. Fresh air rushed through. Darius! Leah's voice echoed from the opposite side. We're here! Bring everyone one at a time! The opening was barely wide enough for a single adult. Parents guided frightened children through first. Flashlights bobbed in the darkness. Boots splashed. Hands reached for one another. Easy, Darius repeated. Watch your step. One little girl froze halfway through. I can't. You can. It's too dark. He knelt until they were eye level. Look at my light. She focused on the steady beam. Now take one more step. She did. Her mother wrapped her in a hug on the other side. One by one, the families passed safely through. Leah counted constantly. 14, 15, 19. Ava stayed near the back, helping younger girls keep moving instead of pushing ahead herself. Darius noticed. So did Leah. Then suddenly, a sharp cry echoed behind them. My hearing aid! A small girl no older than 8 stood trembling near the flooded passage. My hearing aid fell! Her mother turned instinctively. It's okay, sweetheart. We'll get another one. The little girl shook her head desperately. It was Grandma's. She refused to move. Water continued creeping higher across the concrete. Leah looked toward Darius. We have to go. I know. He looked at the child, then at the rising water. Without another word, he handed Leah his flashlight. Keep them moving. Darius, I'll be right behind you. He turned back into the darkness. The beam from his backup light swept slowly across the tunnel floor. Seconds felt like minutes. The water swirled around scattered debris. Finally, there! He spotted the tiny hearing aid lodged against a drain grate. He reached down, retrieved it carefully, and hurried back. The little girl burst into tears when he placed it gently into her hand. You found it. He smiled. I told you I'd be right back. Leah exhaled with visible relief. That's everyone. Go. She ushered the last families through the maintenance exit. Darius followed. Just as he reached the steel doorway, a surge of muddy water rushed through the tunnel behind him. The current slammed into his legs hard enough to throw him off balance. He caught the edge of the doorway with one hand. For a brief second, his feet disappeared beneath the rushing water. Darius! Leah grabbed his arm. Another volunteer seized his jacket. Together they pulled. He stumbled through the doorway just as the steel gates slammed shut behind him with a deafening crash. Silence followed, broken only by rain, and the sound of dozens of relieved parents crying, laughing, and embracing their children. Darius leaned against the concrete wall, breathing hard. His coveralls were soaked. One sleeve had torn against the rusted gate. Before anyone could thank him, flashing ambulance lights washed across the parking area. Emergency crews rushed toward the group. A paramedic approached Darius. "Sir, are you injured?" He opened his mouth to answer. Before he could speak, Marianne Holt stepped between them. Her expression wasn't relieved. It was calculating. She lowered her voice so only Darius and Leah could hear. "We need to discuss what happened here." Darius looked at her silently. Marianne glanced toward the reporters beginning to arrive outside the entrance, then back at him. "I can make every financial problem you've been carrying disappear." She paused. "But only if you're willing to sign one statement." Rain continued falling across the Harbor Point parking lot as paramedics finished checking the last of the children. Parents wrapped blankets around their daughters. Some cried openly. Others stood in stunned silence, still trying to understand how close the evening had come to ending differently. Marianne led Darius a few steps away from the crowd. She kept her voice low. "No reporters need to hear this." Darius folded his soaked jacket over one arm. "What statement?" Marianne glanced toward the emergency vehicles. "The official report will say that one participant left the marked route." He frowned. "No one left the trail." Ava noticed something off the path. She noticed something dangerous on the path. Marianne's expression remained composed. "If the report says she wandered first, then our staff responded to protect everyone." Darius stared at her. "You're asking me to blame my daughter." "I'm asking you to protect her future." She opened a folder already waiting in her assistant's hands. "We can cover every Harbor Point program fee until Ava graduates." She turned another page. "I've also spoken with people at City Housing. There are assistance programs that could erase a significant portion of your outstanding debt." His face didn't change. She continued. "You've lost your wife. You work nights. You're raising a little girl alone. This could change both of your lives." For several long seconds, Darius said nothing. His eyes drifted toward Ava. She was sitting on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, answering a paramedic's questions with Leah beside her. Then he looked back at Marianne. "You know what she'll remember?" Marianne waited. "Not the paperwork. The lesson." She frowned. "I don't understand. If I sign that report—" He spoke quietly enough that no one else could hear. "I'll spend the rest of my life teaching my daughter that the truth only matters when it's affordable." The folder remained untouched between them. Marianne's tone hardened. "You need to be practical." "I am." "Think about Ava." "I am." "Think about her education." "I am." She took one slow breath. "If you refuse, this investigation won't end here." "I know." "There will be questions about why you entered a restricted maintenance tunnel." "I know." "You could lose your job." "I know." Her patience finally cracked. "Then why would you throw away everything you just earned?" A faint sadness crossed Darius's face. "I didn't go into that tunnel to earn anything." He turned and walked back toward his daughter. Marianne remained standing alone in the rain, watching the opportunity disappear. By sunrise, local news stations were already covering the evacuation. Most of the early reports praised emergency crews. But before noon, a short cell phone video appeared online. The clip lasted less than 20 seconds. It showed Darius climbing through a restricted service gate while families shouted in the background. Nothing before it, nothing after it, no explanation, no rescue. Just a man entering an area marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The headlines came quickly. "Man interrupts women's event during emergency. Questions raised about unauthorized access. Officials reviewing Harbor Point incident. Leah watched the reports from her office in disbelief. They cut everything else out, she whispered. A staff member entered quietly. The board wants you upstairs. For what? They've placed you on administrative leave until the investigation is complete. Leah closed her eyes. She had expected criticism, not this. Before leaving her office, she looked through the window toward the empty trail entrance where the event had begun. One decision. One pause. One child she had finally chosen to believe. She didn't regret it, not for a second. That evening, Ava sat cross-legged on the apartment floor while the television replayed the same edited footage. Dad. He muted the sound. Yeah? Why don't you show everyone what really happened? He looked at the cracked compass resting on the coffee table. We will. Then why wait? She was only 10, yet her question carried the weight of someone much older. If people lied about you, she hesitated. Wouldn't you want everyone to know? Darius picked up the compass and turned it slowly beneath the lamp. The truth isn't a weapon. Ava frowned. What is it then? It's a light. She looked confused. A weapon hurts people. He met her eyes. A light helps people find their way. Outside, another news van pulled into the Harbor Point parking lot. Inside the apartment, father and daughter sat quietly together. The city was beginning to decide who the villain was. Neither of them realized. The greatest piece of evidence had been hidden for 3 years inside a cracked brass compass that no one had yet thought to open. 3 days later, the rain had finally stopped. Sunlight filtered through the Monroe apartment window for the first time since the night trail, settling across the kitchen table where the cracked compass rested beside a small screwdriver, a soft cloth, and a magnifying glass. Ava turned the compass over in her hands. The needle still sticks. Darius looked up from the sink. We'll take it to someone who knows old instruments. Before he could finish the sentence, someone knocked gently at the door. Leah Carson stood outside. She no longer wore her Harbor Point jacket. Just blue jeans, a gray sweater, and the tired expression of someone who hadn't slept well in days. I hope I'm not interrupting. You aren't, Darius replied. Ava smiled. Hi, Ms. Carson, Leah smiled back. I heard you were trying to save a compass. Ava nodded. It belonged to my mom. Leah walked to the kitchen table. May I? Ava carefully handed it to her. Years earlier, during search and rescue training, Leah had learned how to disassemble old field equipment without damaging delicate parts. She studied the crack for a moment. The glass has shifted. She found a tiny brass screw almost hidden beneath years of polish. I don't think anyone's opened this in a long time. Darius frowned. I never knew it opened. Neither did Ava. Leah loosened the screw with slow, careful turns. The back plate resisted. Then, with a quiet click, it lifted free. Something thin slipped onto the table. Not metal, paper. All 3 of them stared. It had been folded into a square no larger than a postage stamp. The edges had yellowed with time, but the writing remained clear. Leah unfolded it carefully. Across the top was Nia's handwriting. She recognized it immediately from the labels on Ava's old trail maps. The room fell completely silent. Leah began reading aloud. Proposal. Harbor Point Night Trail Program. Every child deserves the chance to experience the outdoors beside the adult they trust most. That person may be a mother. It may be a father, a grandmother, an older sister, a guardian. Love is not measured by titles. Safety is strengthened by trust. not by assumptions. Leah stopped, her eyes blurred. There was another paragraph beneath it, written more personally. If Ava ever comes here without me, please don't let anyone convince her that she belongs outside the gate because I wasn't able to stay. She is not missing a family. She is only missing time with her mother. A tear rolled quietly down Leah's cheek. She continued reading. If this program ever changes, don't change it for my daughter alone. Change it for this little girl who arrives years from now, believing she doesn't fit the form someone printed before they were born. The kitchen remained still. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Darius lowered himself into a chair. He had carried that compass for 3 years. He had repaired its leather strap twice, polished its brass dozens of times, yet he had never known Nia had hidden something inside. Ava whispered the only words she could find. Mom wrote that? Darius nodded slowly. She did. Leah folded the paper with trembling hands, then looked at Darius. The night you came to my office. He met her eyes. This is why you asked me. He gave a small nod. I hoped there was still someone inside Harbor Point willing to open a door. You knew about the proposal? I knew she wanted to submit one. But not that it was here. No. Leah looked back at the page. Every sentence dismantled the assumption she had defended for years. Darius had never asked for special treatment. He had never asked Harbor Point to pretend Ava's mother could be replaced. He had only asked that one child not be made to feel incomplete because life had already taken enough from her. Leah carefully slid the paper back across the table. This belongs to both of you. Darius gently shook his head. No. She looked surprised. It belongs to every family that hasn't walked through that gate yet. Leah understood, for the first time, completely. The following morning, Harbor Point's board would meet to determine the future of the program. Reporters, city attorneys, parents, board members. Everyone would be waiting for explanations. As Leah folded Nia's letter one final time, she realized the meeting was no longer about defending her career. It was about deciding whether one mother's final words would remain hidden inside a broken compass, or finally become the map that others could follow. By 9 o'clock the next morning, every seat inside Harbor Point's community auditorium had been filled. Parents sat shoulder to shoulder. Board members shuffled thick binders across the long table. A city attorney quietly reviewed notes with the council liaison. Television cameras lined the back wall, their red recording lights glowing steadily. Leah stood alone near the podium. Administrative leave had stripped away her authority, but not her responsibility. Across the room, Darius sat beside Ava. The cracked brass compass rested inside his jacket pocket. Marianne Holt entered moments later, confident as ever, carrying a folder labeled Incident Review. The board chair tapped the microphone. We're here to review the Harbor Point Night Trail incident, determine organizational responsibility, and consider recommendations moving forward. He nodded toward Leah. Ms. Carson? Leah walked to the podium without notes, without slides, without prepared remarks. I made a mistake. The room became still. I believed I was protecting children by enforcing a policy without exception. She looked toward Ava. I never stopped asking whether the rule was fair once life no longer fit the form it was written for. Marianne shifted impatiently. With respect, this meeting concerns operational failures. Leah turned calmly toward her. It concerns both. She placed Naya's folded letter on the podium. This was hidden inside a compass for 3 years. The board chair adjusted his glasses. What is it? The voice we never heard. She handed copies to each board member. Silence spread through the room as they read. One parent quietly wiped away tears. Another lowered her head. Marianne spoke first. "This doesn't change the safety protocols." "No," Leah answered. "It changes why those protocols exist." The board chair looked toward Darius. "Mr. Monroe." Darius rose slowly. He wasn't dressed in a suit. Only clean work boots, dark jeans, and the same weathered jacket he had worn the night everything changed. He stood before the microphone. "My wife never asked me to find Ava another mother." He paused. She knew no one could. The cameras remained perfectly still. "The promise I made wasn't about replacing Naya." He looked toward his daughter. "It was that Ava would never grow up believing our family was broken simply because it looked different." Ava's eyes filled with tears. Darius continued. "Nia also asked something else." His voice remained calm. "If a door ever opened for our daughter." He looked around the room. "Don't let it close behind her." Several board members exchanged quiet glances. Darius rested one hand lightly on the podium. "I didn't ask Miss Carson because she was the closest thing to Ava's mother." He turned toward Leah. "I asked because she had the power to decide whether this injustice would end with one exception." His eyes met hers. "Or with a better system." Leah lowered her head. For the first time in years, she understood that Darius had trusted her long before she had earned it. The board chair leaned forward. "Ms. Carson, are you recommending a permanent policy change?" "I am." Marianne immediately stood. "This organization will be exposed to unnecessary risk." Leah faced her. "The greatest risk is teaching a child they don't belong because the adults stopped looking beyond a checkbox." The room erupted into quiet applause before the chair gently restored order. A board member cleared his throat. "If we approve this proposal, implementation will require public accountability." Everyone understood what that meant. The investigation, the altered reports, the leadership failures. Marianne looked toward the exit, then back toward the board. For the first time, uncertainty crossed on her face. The chair spoke carefully. "Ms. Holt, the independent review will continue." She nodded once, slowly, without argument. Then the chair turned to Leah. "Miss Carson." He paused. "If these reforms move forward, someone will need to lead them." Leah looked across the room, toward Sophie, who had quietly slipped into the back row without telling anyone. Their eyes met. Her daughter gave the smallest nod. Leah drew a long breath. "I'll stay." The chair raised an eyebrow. "Even knowing the criticism you'll face?" "Especially because of it." She looked once more at Naya's letter. "If I helped build the wrong door." Her voice steadied. "Then it's my responsibility to help build the right one." The room fell silent again. Not because the story was ending, but because everyone understood real change had finally begun. 1 year later, Harbor Point looked different. The old entrance sign that once read Mother-Daughter Night Trail had been carefully removed. In its place stood a new wooden sign carved by a local craftsman, Trusted Guide Night Trail. Beneath the title, in smaller letters, someone had added a simple sentence: "Choose the person who helps you find your way." Families gathered beneath the morning sunshine instead of storm clouds. There were mothers holding tiny hands, grandfathers adjusting backpacks, older sisters teasing younger siblings, foster parents, aunts, guardians, and fathers. No one stopped to ask why a family looked the way it did. They simply welcomed them. Near the entrance, A small glass display stood beside the registration table. Inside rested an old brass compass. The crack across its glass had never been replaced, only cleaned. Mounted beneath it was a bronze plaque. "Find your way. Leave room for others." In honor of Leah Monroe, whose vision helped open this trail for every child. People paused to read it before beginning their walk. Many never learned the whole story. They didn't have to. The compass said enough. Leah Carson stood nearby, greeting families as they arrived. She still worked at Harbor Point. Not because the past had been forgotten, but because she had chosen to face it. The independent investigation had concluded months earlier. Marianne Holt had resigned after the review confirmed that safety concerns had been minimized and official reports had been altered. Harbor Point publicly corrected the record. The city formally cleared Darius of every allegation. Soon afterward, Milwaukee invited him to serve as a volunteer advisor on inspections for community recreation sites. He accepted only after asking one question. Will every children's trail be inspected, not just this one? The answer had been yes. Only then did he agree. Across the parking area, Ava adjusted the straps of her backpack. She was taller now. Her confidence no longer needed to hide behind quiet smiles. "Dad." He looked over. "You ready?" "I've been ready for a year." He laughed. "I believe you." They walked together toward the starting line. No volunteer stopped them. No policy separated them. No explanation was required. As they reached the entrance, Leah stepped forward. "I think something belongs with you today." She carefully removed the compass from the display case and placed it into Ava's hands. "It should lead the first walk." Ava looked surprised. "Are you sure?" Leah smiled. "It already has." Ava gently opened the compass. The needle settled smoothly, steady, certain, almost as though it had finally found the direction it had been searching for all along. She looked up at her father. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Are you sad I didn't need someone to be my mom for one day?" Darius smiled softly, the same calm smile that had carried both of them through the hardest season of their lives. "No." He rested one hand lightly on her shoulder. "You never needed someone to pretend to be your mother." She tilted her head. "What did I need?" He glanced toward the families gathering behind them. "You needed grown-ups to stop pretending there was only one kind of family that knows how to love." Ava looked around. A grandfather knelt to tie his granddaughter's boot. An older brother helped his little sister adjust her flashlight. A foster mother hugged a nervous child before the trail began. Everyone belonged. She smiled. "I think Mom would have liked this." Darius looked toward the trees where the trail disappeared into morning light. "I think—" He paused. "She's the reason it happened." The opening whistle sounded. Families began walking. This time, Darius walked beside his daughter instead of waiting outside the gate. Halfway down the trail, Ava unfolded the map she had drawn herself. She took the lead. Not because she wanted to leave her father behind, but because she knew he would always be close enough to see her. Darius followed a few steps back, smiling as sunlight filtered through the trees. There were no barriers left between them, only a winding path, a shared promise, and room for every child who would one day walk behind them. When Darius finally walked the night trail beside Ava instead of watching from outside the gate, he wasn't just keeping a promise to his daughter. He was proving that the strongest promises are the ones that make room for someone else's future too. This story reminds us that one courageous decision can change far more than a single moment. Darius didn't fight for a special exception. He had the courage to stand for a better path, and that one choice changed the lives of families he would never even meet. Today, think about one door in your own life that someone else might be afraid to walk through. Like Darius, you don't have to tear the whole building down. You may only need the courage to hold that door open for the next person. If this story stayed with you, leave a 1 in the comments. And tell me this: if you had been in Leah's place, would you have trusted Ava before the storm proved she was right? I'd love to read your thoughts. And if this story meant something to you, I hope you'll join me for the next one. Because sometimes the quietest acts of courage leave the deepest mark.